This episode of the Media Leader podcast was edited by our production partner, Trisonic. And if you're looking for podcast production support, we highly recommend them. Find them at trisonic.co.uk.
The real challenge for TV isn't just for TV, it's for the industry in general, which is where there's so much competition, there's so much fragmentation. How do you have a consolidated, joined up conversation to actually show what the value of your business is?
Welcome to the Media Leader podcast. I'm Jack Benjamin. There is a lot going on at Paramount these days. On the docket is a proposed merger with Skydance, a sudden change in its media agency, strong growth for Paramount Plus in Q1, managing a rebrand with Five, and it's all happening amid a challenging TV ad market. Given the state of play, I wanted to check in with Lee Sears, Paramount's president of international ad sales, to unpack all that's going on at the conglomerate and how he and his team are working to drive revenue growth amid a period of change and uncertainty. We spoke about the state of the streaming market, how Paramount is looking to simplify TV buying for advertisers, including increasingly SMEs, and whether clients have raised any concerns over the ongoing Skydance merger. This is our conversation. I hope you enjoy. Lee Sears, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Very nice to be here.
So take me back to the start of your career. How did you get into media in the first place, and then how did you end up at Paramount?
So I'd always liked film and TV. I love films, and I love trivia and films. So I actually did a degree in English and film and TV studies, and I thought, this is amazing. I can actually study something I really like. It didn't feel like work. And from there, I knew that I wanted to be in the media industry in some capacity. I wanted to do something which meant I was around content and I could talk about films and TV. So out of university, I applied for a couple of jobs, one of which was at Channel 5. I think Channel 5 was only 4 or 5 years old at the time. And the interview process was great. There was lots of people. It's like an entry-level position. Mm-hmm. It seemed really cool. And it was actually not far from here on Longacre at Covent Garden. And it was I think it was a sales assistant was the title. And I realised after a couple of weeks it was a completely different job to what I expected. There was a lot of maths involved. I was like, oh wow, this is not what I expected.
Not good for a film student.
No. And I was like, wow, I don't know if I've done the right thing. But what I ended up doing was understanding all of the jargon, understanding all of what the maths meant, and then applying what I knew and what I liked about content to the maths. So I could explain who was in a show, what a show was about, and why it was good for a brand or a client, but then also the value equated with it. So that was, 25 years ago now. And that was Channel 5. And Channel 5 obviously went through lots of different iterations of what it was. I left for a bit. Went to work at a startup which dealt in social gaming on Facebook. Mm-hmm. And that was, again, right in at the deep end of the business because it was proper digital. It wasn't related to TV, but learnt a lot there. And then I joined what was Viacom International. So Viacom International was MTV, Nickelodeon and Comedy Central, really. Mm-hmm. That was the main thrust of it. But it was international, so it was really interesting working across different markets, understanding how things were different by country and what the similarities were. It was also before the euro, or as the euro was just kind of coming in, so different currencies across Europe.
Right.
So that was even more complicated. But I think a couple of years in, we acquired Channel 5. And so then it was kind of like a little bit of going back to where I started. And so we had a big free-to-air broadcaster. And over time, what's happened is Viacom became Viacom CBS and is now Paramount Global. And within that, my remit's changed, not only as a reflection of how our business has changed, but I've been fortunate enough to progress. So I now oversee all of our ad sales business in all markets outside of North America. So that includes Canada, Europe, Asia, obviously the UK, Australia. I oversee P+, Pluto, monetization, and as well as overseeing the free-to-airs and the brands, so the pay TV channels. But one of the other things that I've done is I've overseen our events. So things like the European Music Awards, the EMAs, mm-hmm. and they've always been in a different country every year. And that has meant many different things. So that's meant negotiating with governments. It's been bringing our brands to life in the real world. And also understanding what different things mean in different countries. all of it underpinned with media and advertising and partnerships. And I really like the diversity of the job. I think it's really important to understand how, as in a much more connected world, how things can affect us in different countries. But in addition to that, the other part is I oversee our brand studios, which is kind of our creative in-house agency. So where we create content with and for brands, which is an extension of what we may be doing with them on linear TV or on streaming. But on top of that, it can be just in that space where we're working with them creatively. So all of that started with somebody that wanted to be in film and TV. And a real full circle moment is not just, working with and for Channel 5 again, but my dissertation at university was on two things. It was on Sunday football.
Okay.
And it was on The Godfather.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and I'd been really fortunate to be able to go on a lot of Paramount where The Godfather was filmed and be in Francis Ford Coppola's office where he, was directing The Godfather. So, there are some times when you kind of have to take a step back and realise all of the things that have happened to get someone to the point that I'm in now and be very thankful and grateful, but also recognise that that's partly come with hard work and it's partly come with enjoying what I do and being genuinely passionate about it. And I still like talking about content.
And you only have a tiny remit, clearly. It sounds like you have quite a lot on your plate at any given moment.
It is. And you know what? The thing is, it's never boring. I don't think it would be boring anyway, but I don't sleep a lot. And I think most people would say I kind of need to be doing something. So it's quite nice because otherwise I'd just get bored and probably play computer games too much. So there's always an email to respond to or a problem to solve or an opportunity to kind of grasp.
Definitely lots of problems to solve. TV, generally speaking, is in a pretty interesting period right now. I think you would agree. Big broadcasters, conglomerates are working out how to compete in the sort of new digital-led environment. Paramount's no exception. Many of the broadcasters in this country and in the US have sort of begun earnestly making an effort to go after more of the long tail of advertisers, new to TV advertisers, efforts to grow the pie. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this as it relates potentially to Paramount.
Yeah, well, I think it's something we're doing as well. I think that long tail, or let's call them small businesses, which have always found it to be a barrier to TV because it was either too expensive or they didn't have the right ad. I think that's a real opportunity. Other companies, other businesses, especially in the social space, have been doing that for a while. And I think what we're able to do now, and we're actually rolling this out in the US and it will come to other markets, is we are able to cater for those smaller businesses so that they can access our inventory at a much lower entry point, but we can also help with creative for that as well. And I think that removal of that barrier is going to attract a lot of people who want TV-like inventory and want TV-like association, but have thought it's not been possible in the past. And where the real opportunity comes there is, now, in all honesty, those budgets may not be huge. They may not be $1 million campaigns, but hundreds of thousands of advertisers spending thousands of pounds or dollars or euros, that adds up really, really quickly. But I think that's not been something that traditional media owners, traditional broadcasters have been able to do, but now they can, and now they are, and certainly we at Paramount are, and we recognise that as a space, especially with our portfolio of assets, is something that we can and should and will be doing.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that rollout of making it easier to buy?
Yeah, so we've got some products that are launching or have been launching in the US. We've created a team that will be looking after and focusing on SMEs or small to medium businesses. We've got some proprietary tech that will allow us to do that. It's not a new thing. Other people have been doing this as well. But we have that. It will be and is rolling out, and then we will roll it out into other markets when it's ready and appropriate. But it's exactly what I said. It is something where there will be a self-service element to it. There can also be a white glove approach where clients and brands can access our inventory in the right way at the right price, and we will help them do that. And it means that the types of clients that we can attract and work with that long list will become much bigger. It also doesn't mean that we're not focusing on the blue chip, the big clients that spend millions of dollars with us because, of course, we have to. But it just means we can be wider in our scope of who we can speak to.
Has your relationship with media agencies changed at all? We're actually just talking a couple hours after Deadline reported that Paramount's own media agency is shifted without a sort of formal review. So you've gone from working with WPP Media, formerly Group M, to Publicis. Probably have only had a couple hours to react necessarily to that, but how is your relationship with agencies, not just from that side of the business, but also from when you go to market and try and work with them as their clients?
Agencies are our partners, as are the clients as well, so we have to do things in collaboration. And with all agencies, they all have their own tech as well. They all have their own setup. So what we need to do is we need to ensure that we are able to either integrate or work with whatever that setup is so that we can unlock value for them, their clients and our clients. So everything we do is in partnership, and it's really important to collaborate and to be as open to as many different possibilities as possible. If you look at things like P Plus and Pluto, the way that we work with different demand partners, it varies not only by market, but by those partners themselves as well. So really it's about listening. It's about sitting down and understanding what the value exchange is with either that client, because some clients are doing stuff in-house, so how does that work? But equally so, as I said, all of these agencies, they all have their own proprietary tech, or they have something that they've acquired, which is how they want to transact and on the buy side make things work. So we need to, as much as possible, work with them in that way. But of course, we've got to obviously make sure that it's right for us and that all of our inventory is not only surfacing, but is it being bought in the best way possible? Because all of that inventory, all of that content, going back to where we started the conversation, is something we spent a lot of money on. It's super premium. It's all brand safe. So we need that to be reflected in the buy.
Do you worry that with more agencies sort of using AI tools and AI buying and planning, that you might not have as much control over where TV generally sits on the plan, let alone Paramount?
I think at the moment, AI, I could be completely wrong with this, it's really nascent, and everybody's talking about AI a lot. The actual real world application of it, how it will eventually be deployed, I don't think we're quite there yet. I think people recognise there's an opportunity, there's potentially some efficiencies, but really at this moment in time, nobody really knows what that looks like. I think for sure there's going to be some things that we gain, but it's really important that we don't lose that human element where a human being can make an assessment and have a role to play, because if you lose that, then you'll miss out on lots of opportunity. So it's not to say that I'm not worried about it, but it's also, I don't think it's the right time to be able to fully assess what the role of AI will be and where it will come in and what it will provide and what we will lose. But I think it's something we need to be very careful about, and we need to monitor, and everybody needs to understand what the end result needs to be. And the fact that one of the great things about media, what I love about media, is the interactions with people and the relationships and the discussions. And you can't, if you lose that, you certainly lose what I like I said at the beginning, right? Talking about content. And I think you can't get that all if it's AI driven. So a blend is and getting that balance right is really, really important.
But simplification is definitely part of the process, as you sort of mentioned.
Definitely need simplification, because I think things are very complicated, right? If we think back to when I started around the corner 25 years ago, there was like only a couple of TV channels and that was it. Social media wasn't a thing. Streaming wasn't a thing. Digital, like catch up, was like, what is this? So now we've got lots of different players in the market. We've got lots of different ways in which people can watch our content. And that brings with it two things. It brings the famous fragmentation of audiences. So how do you put all of those audiences together to show the true value of a piece of content if everybody's watching one piece of content at different times? You've got lots of more content as well. You've got lots more jargon. So we need a couple of things. We need really robust measurement that can truly talk about what the scale of content or platforms or channels is. And we need to simplify how we talk and how we buy and how we sell. And we need to do that in a way that makes sense and doesn't overcomplicate things. One of the things I think we sometimes do as an industry is we massively overcomplicate things, and we use a lot of jargon, and people,
So much jargon.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been that was the hardest thing when I first started.
When I started 25 years ago, and there was all of the maths jargon, I was like, a CPM. Now, what is that? A rating, and that was then. So now there is so much added layer of complexity that's put on things. Some of it fully justified because there is all of that fragmentation and complexity, but I think what happens often is people are afraid to put their hand up and go, I don't understand, or could you just explain that to me in layman's terms? And when somebody puts their hand up and goes, sorry, that didn't make sense, you can almost hear everybody in a room sigh of relief because like, oh, I'm really pleased somebody said that. So I think that's part of what we need to do as an industry is just put our hands up and go, what are we actually saying here? Because we isolate and alienate people sometimes when we make it too confusing, too complicated to actually get to the basics of what we're trying to say.
Paramount itself simplified its ad offering earlier this year to present 5, which was also rebranded recently. We can talk about that as well. Alongside Paramount Plus, Pluto TV, all within Paramount Connect. Has that had an impact on revenue sales in the immediate term?
Yes. Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. And also, we didn't only do that in the UK. We've done it in other markets. We did it in Australia. I think part of it's about that simplicity, right? So it's about just saying this is everything that Paramount has to offer. And it's a front end and a back end simplification. So the back end bit was where we unified our ad server. So we put all of our inventory in Freewheel. So what that basically means is P+, Pluto, 5, all of that inventory is in Freewheel. And all of that inventory is in the same place globally. So the US, Australia, Europe, all in one place. So that makes it easier to buy from a technical standpoint. But from a front end, from a client-facing perspective, from an audience perspective, we don't really want to make that differentiation between some of our products. So if you're watching 5, you're watching 5. It doesn't matter if you're watching it on streaming, if you're watching it on linear, you are watching shows that you know, and they are all under the banner of 5. And then by putting P+ in the mix and Pluto as well, what we're saying to our clients, to our agency partners, is all of this inventory, all of this premium video inventory is part of the Paramount stable. So rather than creating, isolation, creating division between our audience, we're doing two things. We're creating simplicity and scale. And I think that's really, really important because scale matters, quality matters, but simplicity and ease to buy matters. So putting it all, and connect is what it says, right? We're connecting it all together. So we're able to show the market what we look like. And some people, I don't think it's as much the case now, but some people didn't know that Paramount and 5 are the same thing. You know, they're the same company. So all of this, it's logical and people assume that it's being done, but that was part of the reason for Connect. It's also part of the reason for the rebrand. It's to simplify and let people understand who we are and what we represent.
It's the third time that 5 has been rebranded by my count. I could be off by 1 or 2.
Let's go with your count.
Okay. Why was now the right time to rebrand back to 5 from, I mean, it's been Channel 5, it's been 5, but spelled out 5 as opposed to the number 5. I mean, how did this decision making happen?
I think it's a little bit what I said previously, which is simplification, right? We had My 5 and then we had Channel 5. So everything is now called 5. I don't think we're unique in having over the best part of 30 years kind of subtly rebranded what we were. It isn't like we removed 5 from the conversation. It was just how did that show up? And I think it is almost 30 years that 5's been around. So 3 kind of big brand changes over that time or subtle changes. I don't think that's that many. I think the reason to do it now, though, is because let's call it the 5 portfolio was showing up in different places and was called different things in different places. What we really want to do is just show what 5 stands for. And, 5 isn't just on linear, isn't just on our own streaming services. There are 5 shows that are on Netflix. So what we really want to do is we want it to just be simple to understand that the 5 brand is this. And the consolidation of that makes it much easier for brand awareness generally. But also we don't want to create that division. Whether you're watching on linear or streaming, it doesn't really matter. You're watching 5.
You don't worry that because of a rebrand that there might be actually more confusion in the immediate term for people to recognize that that's the brand that is associated with these
I think
products.
if it was, a big left turn in terms of branding, possibly.
If you called it like 6 or something.
That would confuse me. So I'm glad we didn't do that. I don't think that was ever on the table.
No.
But yeah, just calling it all 5, I think to be honest, it simplifies it. So I don't think that's a worry.
Can you talk to me a little bit about the strategy for growing audiences with 5, as well as, you mentioned Pluto TV earlier. You oversee quite a few different products, and some are growing at different paces in obviously different markets.
In terms of growing the audiences, I think we're very lucky because for 5, Ben Prowl heads up the content and that's his job. And I genuinely mean this. I don't think there is anybody who, and I think most of the industry would say this as well, other than Ben Prowl, who could do the job in the way that he does. I think we're very lucky to have him. He is unique in the way that he approaches it, and he knows the 5 audience better than anyone. So I leave that very comfortably in the capable hands of Ben, but we work very closely together. And I think it's a really good marriage between content, commercial and creative. As I said earlier, I like talking about shows. So we have conversations about what's coming up, what's commercially most attractive, what does he need, what do I need. A really good example of that is the partnership we've struck with the Zone for the Club World Cup. So that is something that was led by ad sales, but in collaboration with Ben, and means that we now have something on 5 which nobody expected. We think that will bring a lot more audience to the channel and some new audience as well. But that's in collaboration with Ben and making sure it's right for the look and feel of the channel. The other thing as well that I think is probably worth calling out is the change of 5 in the last couple of years. If we think that, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, there was only a couple of hours of drama on 5. Now there are hundreds of hours of new original drama on 5, and that's all been under Ben's remit. And that does 2 things. It changes the look and feel of the channel, but it also means that commercially it's much more attractive because suddenly we've got a very different look and we've got different conversations and different audience coming to the channel. That's why we've had the performance we've had. We also do it really efficiently. So Ben is really good at creating content at a very, I don't want to say cheap, but I've said cheap, but a very efficient cost. And what that therefore means is the money that we can then bring in means that we are in a very good position from an overall business perspective. So in terms of growing the audience, for the 5 business, we are very lucky to have Ben at the helm there. And then if we look at other parts of the portfolio, and timing is everything, there was an article yesterday in Broadcast about the growth of P+, and it being the fastest growing streaming service in the UK. I think it's 16% up in terms of new subscribers, and that's driven primarily by Yellowstone, which I've got to be honest, I didn't think I'd like a show about what is perceived to be cowboys as much as I do.
Right.
And Yellowstone is genuinely a cultural phenomenon. As I said earlier, my job is across lots of other markets, and it always surprises me where a show that feels very quintessentially US is loved and talked about by everybody from Australia to Germany to France. So having shows like that is what's helped grow P+, and having that article yesterday is really great for me, being a salesperson.
We also covered it, I will say. It was Barb data from Q1.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. How do you make sure that you don't have a churn issue? Because Barb, their head of insights, really did attribute a lot of the growth to 1923 and Yellowstone. I haven't seen these series, and I'm the American, so I need to get on top of that.
Okay.
But how do you make sure that people didn't just sign up to finish watching Yellowstone, and once they do, they churn and move somewhere else, or they keep subscriptions elsewhere and not come back?
Well, I think the answer to that is relatively simple. The execution of it is what's hard, is you make sure that there's a pipeline and a library of amazing content. And I think Paramount is in a very fortunate position because it's a film studio, right? So we've got a library of content. Historically, from films, we've got a load of amazing drama as a result of not just CBS, but drama that's been made and we've acquired throughout the years. But the easiest answer to that is, you've kind of said Yellowstone in 1923. The show that everybody is talking to me about now is Mobland. So Mobland is the show that's just literally just finished. So there's that. There's Gladiator 2, which premiered on P+. There's all of the Mission Impossible films. So the way that you stop churn is you make sure that there's another reason for people to stay, and that when they are looking around the service, there's things that they recognise and want to kind of dip into and stay with. So I was really pleased when I saw the article yesterday because it was talking about Yellowstone. It didn't even talk about Mobland, which is, I think, going to have a massively positive impact in the next set of results. So the way in which you resist churn, and again, that's more challenging in this world because there's so much content everywhere, is you make sure that you're producing the types of shows that P+ is on a regular basis and the film studio can provide and the library that we have. Again, easy to say that, hard to do, but I do feel very strongly positive about the fact that we've got a lot that's not only coming and in the schedule, but further out that will get people talking in the way they already are.
What about bundling? Would that be part of the strategy going forward?
Well, look, I think that isn't necessarily my area, but what we do know is that partnership's very, very important. So we're always open to different conversations with different partners. I think it has to be right for all parties, but if it makes sense, we will have those conversations. We've got examples of where we've done things like that before. So I think there'll always be a conversation around bundling, especially in a world that's more competitive, but that's not really my area. But I think we see examples of where it's being done elsewhere, and by market, you'll always look at the best way to ensure that you're reaching the widest possible audience.
Your area is more in terms of the ad tier, right?
Yes.
So how is the ad tier performing now that it's sort of been some time since it's been launched?
I think we are very happy with the numbers that we have, not only for the ad tier, but for P+ in general. And I think there's no better, let's call it sales material or sales armory, than the article that was produced yesterday. Because what it does is it shows material scale. It's authenticated by Barb. They are shows that everybody is talking about. The best thing is when people talk to you about your shows or they want to be associated with them. And the ad tier and the commercialization of the P+ service comes in a couple of ways, right? There's the inventory, so there's selling the space around the shows where the ad tier exists. But the other thing that we do, and we can only really do this as Paramount, within Paramount, is we can work with brands around the shows. So we are able to integrate products into the shows. We are able to have a brand that is part of some of the shows that we're talking about, which then provides even more value, and then they can obviously market within the ad tier to reference that they were in the show. All of that is something which is becoming much more mature now. I think streaming is something that everybody understands. I think the market is embracing the opportunity from an advertising perspective. So having more players in the market that have ad tiers actually helps, because clients and brands are now starting to recognise that there's scaled audiences there. We need to be there as a brand, and therefore P+ performing as it is. And it's not just obviously in the UK, it's in Australia, Canada. It'll be launching in Germany in June. It's been in the US for a long time. It means it's established and people understand what it is. So we are very happy with its performance, but it's also really important for me in my sales role, because having an SVOD ad tier is complementary to an AVOD service like Pluto, streaming on 5, and then the linear business. It means we've got a little bit of everything that gives us a really robust suite of assets that we can basically cater for all client needs.
I appreciate that it was a really good quarter in terms of growth, in terms of total households, in terms of by percentage, it was top marks. However, you're still dwarfed by some competitors in terms of, namely Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, very different strategies. I'm just sort of curious how you view the market, because it's great to see growth, but you want to see, I imagine, total figures as high as possible. Yeah,
but those other services that you mentioned are SVOD only. So for me, it's about, P+ will continue to grow, right? The numbers that it's posting is really, really good, and they need to look like that, because our approach to the ad tier has been different to some of those other players, and we've either not asked people to opt out or we've not been in market as long. So we are growing, we're catching people up. But in addition to that, we're not only offering the ad tier on an SVOD service. As I said, it's Pluto, it's Five, it's MTV and Nickelodeon. We've got a big social following as well. And we've got a studio that can create integrations and branded content. So all of those things are what makes us different. And we also oversee integrations for Emily in Paris because that's a Paramount show.
Right.
So what we are able to offer and what we do isn't defined just by the SVOD service, but it's incredibly important. Of course it is, because it's super premium, everybody's talking about it, but really the Paramount global offering is not just that. For sure, we are focused heavily on streaming, and we want to see articles like we saw yesterday every quarter, but I think the opportunity is far bigger than just that. But that's going to become more and more part of the focus, of course.
In terms of content, you mentioned live sports is more important, drama is more important. You know, I'm just sort of curious in terms of, it sounds like you're doing a good job staying efficient, but especially with sports rights deals. I mean, it's not just you guys that thinks live sports and drama is important. Does that worry you in terms of like the long-term sustainability, in terms of the cost of acquiring rights or producing really high quality shows that are necessary to compete? Because there are more competitors today than there were when you first started.
Yeah, well, I think I think everybody says sports important. It is. It's one of those things that you have to watch live, right? So it's genuine appointment to view. We have a big sports business in the US with CBS Sports, where we've got all of the big sports on the channel and across the service there. But I'd point to things like the DAZN deal, like the deals that we've announced recently in the sports space, where we can be opportunistic, creative about how we get sport on the channel. I think as a business, we will always look at sports rights and see what's available and evaluate whether it makes sense for us. Part of it is about what will it do audience-wise, what will it do for the brand, and then part of it is about the commercialization of that asset, and can we make sure that whatever we're paying for it, we can, reap a return on it. I think everybody is going to be after sports because it is going to become more and more competitive. But I think what's also important is the distribution of that sport. So there are certain categories, certain sports which have to be available to everybody on free-to-air. So that puts us in a good place because we can obviously bid and compete for those. But equally so, we want to make sure that the sport is right for our audience as well. So I think we are going to be doing and evaluating sport ongoing throughout, the future, throughout the present. And I think that provides a big opportunity for us. Where it's also interesting for me in my role is, can we bid for those sports rights in a multi-market approach? So does it make sense to bid for the rights with our colleagues in the US? Does it make sense to bid for the rights where we've got other free-to-air assets across our international portfolio? And again, that puts us in two, I would say, advantageous positions. One, we can create economic synergies. Two, we can actually provide a more rounded service for the sporting body as well, where we can say this is what Paramount Global will look like as a combined bid. But that's another thing which is really interesting about the job.
Another thing that I'm sure is very interesting about the job at the moment is the ongoing merger talks with Skydance. I'm curious how, if at all, you've been managing any potential commercial impacts as that deal has progressed. I mean, I know it's specific to the US market, but a lot of brands are operating globally.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the Skydance conversation hasn't really affected conversations with clients and partners. We've just carried on. And I know everybody says this, but genuinely BAU, just to make sure that we are operating and being the best partner possible. There's not really much I can add that's not really in the public domain, to be perfectly honest. But for us, not just in ad sales, but generally, it's just carry on doing a good job, and everything else will kind of reveal itself.
You mentioned CBS. CBS News is obviously at the center of a lot of media coverage at the moment in relation to the Trump administration suing 60 Minutes, which is a CBS-run show, and then that, of course, having impact on the potential merger deal. It sounds like there's a settlement that's going to be reached to this lawsuit when it probably does not need to be a settlement. In fact, Leslie Stahl just talked to David Remnick about this exact thing and said that it's probably a frivolous lawsuit, could definitely be won in court, and yet a settlement might be reached. this has not come up at all in terms of conversation with clients. Advertisers haven't registered any level of concern over what's been going on between CBS and the Trump administration?
I mean, I think also outside the US, some of that stuff, it doesn't really ripple as far across over to this side of the pond. So genuinely, that's not come up in conversations with clients, with partners. Everybody keeps asking when things are going to happen and conclude, and I can't answer that because I genuinely don't know. So for me, in my capacity, that sort of stuff hasn't really come up. And as for the details of it, I mean, everything's publicly out there, so everybody can kind of speculate on what they think. But for me, in my day-to-day of my job, that really genuinely hasn't had an impact.
So you've got a lot going on, clearly.
No.
What does success look like? How are you going to define success for your personal role, but also for the wider commercial business within the next, let's say, year or so? What do you really want to achieve?
I think, and this is something I do with the teams, right? It's about ensuring that everybody knows what the Paramount portfolio is. And it's that consolidation of all of the assets. It's going out with a converged sell. So not being too focused on one particular thing. Obviously more money. I think in addition to that, it's about making sure, and if we think about it, for English language markets, UK, Australia, etc., the team being really well known, has been really good to deal with, coming up with really creative responses that kind of thread the needle across the entire portfolio. So whether we're doing something on 5 or P Plus or Pluto, everybody kind of wanting to work with us, everybody understanding what our content looks like, and being the best partners possible to agencies and clients, which in turn will result to more money for the business. But within that, what I really like doing is coming up with partnerships that people go, oh, that's really good what they've done over there. I want to know more about that, and getting clients and brands calling us and wanting to work with us. And we're starting to see that more now. So that's at a really high level. I think being a little bit more focused, one of the things that I really want to do is make sure that we are continuing to monetize the P Plus ad tier really, really well. We've got off to a really good start with that.
Does that mean price hikes or
no? It means making sure that we've got as many brands as possible and a really good variety of brands that are spending with us on the ad tier. I want to work on integrations and getting the right brands to be associated with the shows. Then on the 5 side, we've seen record growth on our 5 streaming service. So I think it's over 50% up year on year in terms of hours watched. So making sure that we are continuing to monetize there. I want the right sorts of partnerships with brands on the channel in terms of sponsorships and integrations.
What kind of brands do you like to go after for all these different different services?
There's 2 different types of categories I'd put it into. There's big global brands that everybody knows and loves and, can go, oh, that's a big brand. And then there's brands that are an amazing fit for a product or that just fit really well with whatever the show or format is. And I think if you get the right partnership, what it enables you to do is do more storytelling. So then you can start to create more content with that brand around the show. And that's where I'm very lucky to work with a lot of people in my team that are really creative and can help with that storytelling. So I often like to come up with ideas and go, right, I want to work with this brand. Let's find a way to work with that brand. So be proactive. I want us to take opportunities to the market. I want us to take out ideas. I don't want to wait for a brief. I don't want people to send us a brief and go, here's an RFP. You've got a week, and it's never a week, to turn around this response for this brand. I want us to go to brands. I want us to go to agencies and say, we had thought of you. This is what we think could be a really good idea, and we would love to work with you on it. And I think when I know that we've done really well is when people are going, oh my God, we've got loads of people calling us and they want to do this. They've seen some things that we've done and they want to replicate it. That to me is what success looks like. And that is what we're starting to see now.
And what would you say is the big challenge facing the TV industry more broadly?
I think the TV industry does look, the conversation around audiences for TV and the decline of them is something that's been going on for over 10 years. So I think it's about getting in front of that narrative and talking about the fact that there is still substantial scale on what we'd call linear TV. And there are still audiences that come in and the first thing they do is switch on their TV. Now, obviously, TV has changed. It means many different things. And I think part of the challenge is, as you said earlier, making quality content is expensive. So the challenge for TV is about making sure that the cost of that quality content is recognised and we are able to extract as much value from that content to justify the cost of it. The real challenge for TV isn't just for TV, it's for the industry in general, which is where there's so much competition, there's so much fragmentation. How do you have a consolidated, joined up conversation to actually show what the value of your business is, what the value of your IP is, what the value of that show is? Because what you'll find is a show may not do as well as you thought it would immediately, but then people will find that show 3 months later and start watching it somewhere else. And I always think about, this is when I'm going to talk about content, The Shawshank Redemption, which was an absolute whopping flop when it came out of cinema.
Yeah, big in home sales though.
Exactly,
right?
And people found it, and it now often makes people's top tens. And one of the films that people will put on when they're kind of, want some comfort or want something to watch is The Shawshank Redemption. And I think the challenge for TV is that because there's so much content now, people will find a show 6 months, a year later that nobody really watched when it first came out, and then everybody will be talking about it afterwards. So the real challenge is, how do you aggregate your audience? How do you actually talk about what the value of your portfolio is, knowing that not everybody will watch something at 9 o'clock on a Thursday night?
And also not canceling shows that maybe haven't found their audience yet, but need that time still. Because I think that's probably the largest consumer complaint I've heard in the streaming era has been, I really love season 1 and 2 of this show, and then they stop making it.
I agree. But the other thing as well is, I think we as an audience now have been programmed for instant gratification. And sometimes there are so many people that say, I watched it, but I kind of gave up on it. It's like, yeah, but you need to get past series 2. But, you could stay. Once you get past series 2, it really kicks in, or episode 2. So I think that's a challenge for all of us, right? Because we've now been programmed to not give as much time to things. So I think that's a challenge for us as an industry generally, is how do we get people, and I don't know about you, but I've got loads of people who told me they've spent ages on a streaming service looking for something to watch, and it's taken them ages.
Content overwhelm.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes people do need to, be directed. So I think that's a challenge as well. One of the beauties of TV and one of the comforts of it from a linear perspective is, you can't change that channel's schedule, which is good and bad depending on your perspective. But there is something to be said for, okay, the decision has been made for me.
Yeah. It's like people that put a lot of effort into like picking out the right socks for their day.
Yeah.
Some people really like that choice, and every morning they have to make that choice and how they're going to feel and what they're going to wear. And some people just want the exact same color socks every day. They don't have to think about it.
Well, Einstein's wardrobe was the same shirt, trousers, socks and jacket every day because he didn't want to think about it. Well, it's hard to argue with his logic.
Lee Sears, I think that's a good way to end it. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Media Leader Podcast. Our executive producer is me, Jack Benjamin. Special thanks to our production partner, Trisonic. You can find all our episodes on the podcast platform of your choice or on our website at uk.themedialeader.com. But do please remember to subscribe to be notified of our next episode. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at The Media Leader to receive daily coverage of all the biggest news stories in media and advertising. From all of us at The Media Leader, I'm Jack Benjamin. See you next time.